Engines!
Hit the pace car! What for? Because you hit every other damn thing out there, I want you to be perfect.
When I'm driving, I got a guy on the radio who talks to me. It's him. He talks to me.
Well, I wanna be a race car driver. Pretty girls eating from my hand, yeah. Wanna live a life of fun and danger. No sweating working for the man, alright. Well, hey. Well, I wanna be a firefighter. Cool-headed when the heat is on, yeah. Save my baby from the burning building. Take all the women's sleepless on, alright. Well, alright.
No, he didn't slam you, he didn't bump you, he didn't nudge you, he rubbed you. And rubbing, son, is racing.
Good evening, race fans. Welcome to the Hoobazoo Radio Network, and welcome to the Drafting the Circuits radio program. My name is Frank Santoroski. I'll be your host for the next hour as we go over this past week in the racing, hit all the headlines, and preview next week. With me in the studio tonight, as always, Mr. Gray Warren from Richard Childress Racing. I have IndyCar.com's Joey Barnes. Our resident Formula One analyst Richard Youden is here with us, as well as Motorsports Tribune on Seth Eggert, who covers NASCAR and the Junior Series. How is everybody tonight?
Doing good.
Very good, thank you.
All right, great to talk to you guys. Again, a packed weekend of racing. All three major series were in action. IndyCar finale, last race of the season. I always hate that our season ends so early. But I guess it makes room for the NFL and the NASCAR chase. But anyway, wrapped up a really good season in IndyCar. Scott Dixon takes his 5th championship. The only other guy with more than 4 is A.J. Foyt. Foyt's got 7, so Scott's only 2 behind him now, with everybody else in the racing world behind Scott. So good on Dixon there. In the process, Ryan Hunter-Reay wins the race. Will Power was second. Simon Pagenaud and Marco Andretti rounded out the top 5. Formula One was in Singapore. Lewis Hamilton took yet another improbable win. We thought maybe he would struggle in Singapore. Lewis hasn't struggled anywhere this year. Dominates that race. Behind him, Max Verstappen, Sebastian Vettel. And the Cup guys began their chase down there in Las Vegas. Several of our chase participants ran into some trouble, but at the end of the day, it was Brad Keselowski winning 3 in a row. The last 2 of the regular season and the first one of the chase. He's the first guy to punch his card to the next round. And Seth, when was the last time we had 3 Cup drivers win 3 races in a row in the same season?
This is the first time.
Never. That's right. So, good stuff going on in Cup this year as far as some of the stats that we're putting up. So, anyway, there's other news we're going to talk about tonight. There's exciting team announcements and driver movements in different series. But first, let's talk about the IndyCar race in Sonoma. It would come down to a battle for the championship between Alexander Rossi, who is one of the most dynamic new stars of the series, and Scott Dixon, who is the grand champion of the series, the gold standard that everybody strives to be. Rossi made his day a little harder from the get-go. First off by qualifying 6th, holding up the rear in the fast 6, but a little miscue on the first lap dropped him back. So Joey, you were out there in Sonoma covering the race for IndyCar and covering the race for Motorsports Tribune and for us as well. So let's talk about that first lap and then Rossi's day from there on out.
Yeah, the opening lap was pretty interesting because you get through there and you figure, okay, everything's going to end up okay. You go up through 1 and 2, but as we saw, Power and Marco were ahead of Rossi there side by side, and it looked like just briefly Marco let out of the throttle, and not expecting that, Rossi just got right into the back of him, right into the left rear tire of him, and it folded the right front. So he went around a little wounded, managed to go off the access roads and come back through and pit, and was really just on it from then on out. And we saw what Rossi was made of the rest of the race, because there was a portion there when he came back out where he was just right on Dixon's tail, and he was just unrelenting. And to Dixon's credit, you're trying to keep the guy behind you, because at that point you keep your biggest championship rival, at bay the rest of the race, and you ensure yourself a title. So he kept him behind for, I want to say it was like 10 or 12 laps, and then with Graham Rahal essentially pulling off to the side right after, I think it was turn 9, with a battery issue. Caution came out. Rossi was able to kind of get back on the lead lap and battle through the field that way, in which case we saw a hell of a show out of him. I mean, he came up from, I think it was 19th, got all the way up to 5th, and just ran out of time, ran out of tires, and didn't have enough time to execute the rest of the championship push there. But, for Dixon, his 5th title, like you alluded to, only A.J. Foyt has more with 7. I think that it's funny how we revere guys like Foyt and Andretti and guys like those now, and I'm curious to see how we're going to remember Dixon. But kind of looking at this moment for what it is, it looks like Dixon is finally, after having 4 of these, you figure he already would, but there was a different presence with him, with how he was on pit road, the celebration, the way he just kind of embraced this championship. You could tell he really wanted, even though he was being very stoic beforehand, as Dixon always is. But I think that what this also shows us is, how much it means to him, but also what we're in store for in the future. Because somebody like Rossi, sometimes, I don't mean this is going to come across bad, but sometimes you can look at drivers or look at athletes, and you can just see if they have the makeup of sustainability to be able to go out there year in and year out and just continue to push. And Rossi's one of those guys that just demands so much from himself that he's not going to go out there next year and lay an egg and finish 10th in the championship. I mean, I know the IndyCar Series is the most competitive in the world, but he's somebody that's going to end up being in the championship conversation at the year's end, probably from here until the end of his career, just because he's got that kind of makeup and that kind of resolve. But, I think what we're in store for now is to see if Dixon can go up there and match Foyt. But with guys like Rossi involved, with Power always involved, I'm still waiting on that Power Dixon head-to-head championship battle. I think we've all longed for that, because everybody sees them two as the benchmark when it comes to just what they're able to do with a race car. But now you can add Rossi to that list, and we know Newgarden's definitely going to come to play since he's part of Penske. And not to mention some of the rising stars that came up this weekend. I mean, we saw Patricio Ward come up, the Indy Lights champion, make his debut, gets in the Firestone Fast 6 with Harding Racing in a second entry. They've never fielded 2 cars before. Maybe they should more often, as we'll get into. They will. But, and goes out there and gets the top 10. So, this championship's only going to continue to get better. But in terms of what we saw in the here and now, is a hell of a last way to end Sonoma's reign for the season finale.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, you can only imagine what the complexion of the race would have been if Rossi would have started in 6th and stayed in 6th and been in the top 5 and pressuring Dixon for real, for position, and not to get a lap back. I think, we saw just how cool and calm Dixon was under pressure there, just keeping him a lap back, and it's just, the steely resolve of Scott Dixon, who just gets better every year, and he makes it look so easy. He did exactly what he needed to do today. He didn't have to. He knew that second place was going to guarantee him the championship, so there was no need to push Ryan Hunter-Reay for the win. He just needed to make sure he kept Rossi behind him, and he could have let Rossi go and just to avoid any entanglement or an accident there, because he was a lap down. But he didn't want to make it any easier on Rossi, because as we saw, that caution came out, puts him right back on the lead lap in short order. So. But that being said, you briefly touched on Rossi going down the escape roads on the opening lap there. Now, there was no penalty for this. I personally, when I watched this, I felt like it's a wounded car, where he's taken the shortcut through. He's probably, by staying off the racing line, not causing a caution. And, of course, dropping the last place was, pretty much a penalty in itself. But yet now there are a lot of folks that are unhappy, felt like he deserved a penalty because he didn't lose as much time as he would have had he run the full course. So, again, I'm perfectly fine with the way it went down, and they talked about it in the drivers' meeting. But, Greg, do you feel the same way, or did you have a difference of opinion?
No, I agree with the call that IndyCar made. He did not improve his position, and if you go by the writing of the rule, it doesn't say nothing about time. It says about improving your position, and obviously he didn't improve his position because he dropped to the rear end of the field. So yeah, I think that the no call was the right call in that regard. I don't see where people had anything because he dropped completely to the rear of the field, and when he after the pit stop he was 60 some seconds over a minute behind. So yeah, but I mean, he tore through the field. I mean, it was a great drive, and just to echo what Joey said, yeah, certain guys you can see they have that drive, and like a Kyle Busch or Kevin Harvick. That they get in that race car and they're going to give you every single ounce of what they have in that car. And Rossi certainly does that. And, the IndyCar right now is in a good place. I just wish they had more races to showcase what they've got during the course of the year. But, it's like we said, you got Rossi, you got Dixon, you got Will Power. Pagano had what I consider an off year, but he's still a force to be reckoned with. Newgarden, and then some of the other guys, Ryan Hunter-Ray. So yeah, I mean it's the future is now for IndyCar. I just wish they can gain some traction and momentum with the fans and TV ratings, and I think maybe with NBC SN coming on next year. I think they're going to have the whole season next year. Is that right, Joey? All the races, ABC, and is getting totally away from it.
Yeah, everything's going to NBC and NBCSN for the next few years. And,
I think they'll do a great job promoting it, and I just like I said, I wish they would pick up a few more races that where their season would be just in the public eye a little bit more for the fans.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think that to Frank's point earlier is that this place is such a qualifying track. Talking about keeping it, maybe if they could have just had the straight up fight where he kept Rossi behind him and it was just for a lead lap battle. It would be interesting to see what Rossi could do. As much as I agree with that. Sonoma is also a qualifying track, and you could argue that with this situation that Rossi was in, he was behind the 8-ball immediately. Obviously, he was already behind Dixon, but only 2 drivers in the entire race out of the whole 85 laps that were run at that place. 2 drivers that were started outside the top 10 finished in the top 10. So, 8 of the top 10 qualifiers finished in the top 10. It speaks volumes that Rossi was able to get back into that situation, but therein lies the other end is that the pace was at the tip of the sword there, and because Dixon and Hunter-Ray both ends up finishing second and first, and that's exactly where they started. So qualifying is so important there. But I think the other end of that to talk about this with Gray is you talk about where IndyCar is and being in a good place. I think the part that's amazing about this entire season is that this was the first year now finished with the Universal Aero Kit, and we saw even more great racing than we had previously at some places. Some people will say, it was a little lackluster compared to what I got used to, and that's fine, but I think we could all...
I agree. I think they could tweak it on the ovals a little bit, but I think you're right. The what we saw on the street and road courses was really good.
Yeah, the overall platform was great, and I think that it speaks volumes to the competitive nature that we still had for the 13th straight year. The championship came down to the final race of the season. So, Frank, I just saw that I kind of cut you off there. Sorry about that.
Oh, no, you're fine. No, good points. Yeah. So again, let's get back to the television, right? So I just want to bring this one up quickly because we talk about the whole thing is going to be on NBC next year. NBC has a couple different platforms. Obviously, they have NBC proper, the network that I believe they're going to show 5 races next year, including the Indy 500. Then the remainder of them will be on NBCSN, but occasionally NBC has shown races on CNBC. And with a later rebroadcast on NBCSN. And the interesting thing is that the times they've done that, the CNBC races, they actually have gotten better ratings because CNBC is actually in more households than NBCSN. But which brings me to the little bit of the little minor debacle that happened on Sunday with the overlap in the NASCAR race. Now, if you didn't see that coming, you're foolish, because I looked at the television schedule and I knew exactly what was going to happen. NASCAR races are prone to run long. They have overtime rules. When they get into overtime, they like to finish under green. Late race red flags are not out of the question. I knew that was going to happen. And during the red flag, NBC cut away to show the start of the IndyCar race. They sort of missed the start. They picked it up a lap too, but they replayed the starting incident, and they kept with the race until the red flag was over. Then when the NASCAR guys refired their cars, they switched back over to the NASCAR broadcast for the final laps of the race, which luckily we didn't have another green-white checker. They were able to finish the race quickly there. Keselowski took the win. So my point is we could have got a little more IndyCar in there, okay? Because when we went back to the NASCAR broadcast, we got to watch 4 warm-up laps under caution before the green flew. We could have stuck with IndyCar until the lights went off in the pace car. That's just me, 3 more minutes of IndyCar, and then after Brad took the checker flag, well, then we had to watch him do his burnouts, pick up the flag, do his victory lap, and then do his interview. We could have cut back to IndyCar right after the green flag flew, and then checked in later and picked up Brad's interview. Just my 2 cents on
the red flag.
Right, but they could have put that whole race on CNBC to begin with and avoid the conflict. Is my bigger question, because you got a lot of angry IndyCar fans about there, and me, I wasn't necessarily angry because I saw it coming, as a lot of us did. So, but anyway, that's that's my 2 cents on it. So, yep. Now, Richard, you had a point about television as well, and Seth. So Richard, then Seth.
Yeah, one thing I did notice, and I don't know how it affects the coverage, but NBCSN has this gold pass now that I know they're doing with a lot of the English Premier League soccer that they show on a Saturday morning. So, it used to be every game was available. Now you get one game and then you can pay extra for the others. I hope they're not sort of going to start throwing that out there.
Well, that'll be...
that was a banner, wasn't it, that was going across the coverage at some point during the race, and I was a bit...
Yeah, what I see happening with this, Richard, is all of the stuff that they stream on Facebook for free right now, the practice sessions and the qualifying, that'll all be on NBC Gold, so you'll have to pay for that. So unfortunately, where we were kind of spoiled with getting a lot of that content for free on the Facebook page, it'll all be, and I don't know what that app costs. The NBC
it's about
Gold.
$10. I think it's like $10 a month or something. From what I can, well,
$10 a month. $10 a month is a tiny bit high. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If it was like $25 a year, it would be. Just because you're not watching full races, you're just looking at bonus coverage there. So I don't know.
Exactly.
It's again more teething issue. So now, Seth, you had a point on television also.
Yeah, in situations like this in the past, what they've done is they've shown the entire IndyCar race on CNBC and then rebroadcast it later on in the day on NBCSN instead of scheduling it live.
Yeah, Seth, that's what I said when I started the conversation. Remember that?
Moving on.
I'm just Seth. I'm sorry. I just gotta give you a hard time. So Joey, major announcement today at Yankee Stadium. One of the worst kept secrets. A lot of us knew this was coming, but we're asked to keep it quiet. So, but I'll let you spill the beans because now we don't have to keep it quiet. So, announcement today, Yankee Stadium.
What announcement? What are you talking about? There's not. No.
They beat the Red Sox. Was that what?
Why are we talking about motorsports and baseball?
I don't know.
So George Michael Steinbrenner IV was a part team owner for Andretti Steinbrenner Racing and Indy Lights, and he and Mike Harding from Harding Racing got together and today they announced that they formed Harding Steinbrenner Racing. They're going to run a 2-car organization in the IndyCar series starting next year. And as many would have thought, the 2 drivers that were driving for Harding Racing this past weekend, Colton Herta and Patricio Ward, are going to be their 2 drivers beginning next year. So exciting news. We get another car on the grid, but we also get 2 really awesome kids, 2 really good talents who, for anybody that pays attention to Indy Lights, they really pushed each other this year to that championship. I mean, it was just hard fought and earned. Colton got the Freedom 100 win at Indianapolis, finished second in the championship. Pato, I think he ended up winning off the top of my head without looking. I think it was 9 races this year out of 17. So just unreal, the kind of championship that they put on. But, excited to see what they can do in IndyCar. Unfortunately, that means that, once again, Gabby Chavez is finding a ride. But
or maybe not finding a ride.
Maybe not finding a ride. But for what it means to Harding, because they really needed an injection of some sort to really jumpstart this organization, to get better. I think 2 cars is going to help them develop more, and I think that they've got 2 talented drivers there that can definitely carry that team and carry that torch for years to come.
And the other thing is about Ward, even though he has that Irish-sounding name, he's from Mexico, and we've been talking about this Mexico City race, and one of the things that will really help sell it is a solid star in the series who's from Mexico. And we talked about, Gutierrez or whatnot, but Ward has the makings of he's got star potential. He's young enough, and I think that would really help sell that race in Mexico City if we had a guy from Mexico there who was just out there in a top car winning races, which is not out of the realm of possibility that Harding will be one of the top teams when you consider the influx of money we're getting from the Steinbrenners and the technical alliance with Andretti. So I mean, look what the kid did in Sonoma his first time in an IndyCar.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing here, though, also, and I wrote about this on IndyCar.com, is when I talked to him and I asked him about that. I said, you're a Mexican American. You were born in Mexico. You live in Texas. Interesting sounds.
I don't know what that was.
But he's born in Mexico, lives in Texas. And, he's already got a Rolex 24 victory to his credit, a class victory and a prototype challenge class last year. He understands what it's like to lose a championship like Pro Mazda in 2016, and he's come out the other side of this whole situation to be an Indy Lights champion. He's 19 years old. He's got the moxie. He's got charisma. If you've ever sat down and talked with him or you see him, he's certainly not camera shy, and he's not afraid to give you a good quote. And he's flat out said, I want to be the guy that takes IndyCar back to Mexico. And I think that, not only is he somebody that has that awareness, he's down in Mexico pretty often during his bye weeks for promotional work or media or this or that or the other. And he's always involved in that community. He's also involved up here in these communities, like here in Texas, where I'm based. And so it's good to see that a guy that has that kind of moxie and that kind of charisma, he's fast, and I think that the fact is that he still is able to finish races and win races, and I think that's going to be important if we're going to take IndyCar back to Mexico for the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And my other thought on this team is, as good as Pato O'Ward is, and Colton Herta certainly is a young talent as well. I mean, that kid is really good too. But you've got a team with a relatively new owner, youngest owner in IndyCar, by the way. So we've got 2 rookie drivers, and we don't have a veteran in the cockpit there. That certainly can hurt a team. I mean, we've seen things, and what comes to mind is Ganassi putting Bruno Junqueira and Nick Manassian in the car in 2001 and having a really rough go of the first half of the season without a veteran there with input on the setup. So, what's your feeling with these 2 young guys and what struggles that it may cause with the team?
Well, I'll go further back than that. The thought that I immediately get when I hear Steinbrenner and his age and this is gonna, people might blow this out of proportion, but I immediately think of Roger Penske in some ways, because I think about way back in the day. Penske, you sit down and you talk with him, and he'll tell you, we showed up, a couple of young guys, crew cuts. A lot of people probably didn't know what in the hell we were doing, and they started to put things together, and before you know it, they started building up an organization that started to tackle everything and win at everything. And I feel like in some ways, given his age and obviously youth being on his side, I kind of feel that way about George Michael. That said, as far as these drivers go, I feel like Pato, because he's driven a heavier car from IMSA last year, I feel like he's got his ability to adapt might be a little bit quicker. But I feel like, where his is, where he drives a car more physical and throws it around and still manages to take care of equipment and his adaptability is there, I feel like you're also getting somebody who mechanically is sound and drives aggressive in his own right, but kind of has a more methodical approach about him. And I feel like that's what you're getting with Colton. Both know how to get to the front. They just have different techniques in getting there. I feel like maybe we're going to see each one kind of, one race Pato will do really well, another race Colton will do really well, and I expect that back and forth to continue for a better part of next year. But I feel like by the end of the year, we're going to start to see them. I don't want to say top 10 because this field is so competitive, but I'll say top 12, top 15 consistently because we're looking at potentially having 25 cars in the grid next year. So
and possibly more. My understanding is that Delara is taking several more orders for chassis. So because we're looking at Ricardo Yuncos wants to expand to 2 cars. And run them full time. He just had the 1 car this year and ran the 1 car in various races. Harding is going to 2 cars. There's talk of a third Rahal car. I mean, there's always talk of a third Rahal car. And then of course there's talk of the Alonso entry, which we'll probably hear about sometime around the U.S. Grand Prix. Would be my thought.
Do you think? I don't mean to cut you off here, but do you think a Rahal third entry would be a good idea right now?
Rahal's always kind of been an up and down team. They've been the last couple of years, they've been pretty consistent. When they're running the 1 car with Graham, they managed to win a few races every year. This year, they struggled a little bit. I mean, outside of Sato taking the win in Portland, they were nowhere a lot. So I don't know if a third car will be beneficial or not, but if that third car comes with a significant amount of backing, more money never hurts a team. I'll just put it that way. So we'll just have to see. I'm surprised that they weren't more on the mark this year when they were pretty darn good during the Honda AeroKit era. They were the best Honda week in and week out, while it was the Andretti guys that were struggling.
I mean, I think the combination of the new car certainly was something that they had to learn to adapt to, and you need 2 cars to try to get more research and development to get good, right? Because you got Andretti with 4 cars, you got all these other teams and organizations with multiple cars, but I almost wonder, in some ways less is more, right? And I think in this situation, Sato is incredible with his drivability, and so is Graham, but I feel like maybe they were spread a little bit thin on the engineering or mechanical side of things. The talents are there behind the wheel, but, part of that, you need a little bit of that injection or a little bit of that boost to kind of go back to it on the mechanical side of things. And I feel like if they went to 3 cars, if they could get the injection of money to help build up that staff even more, then hell yeah, it makes a lot of sense. But I think that if that's something that's not necessarily feasible, then I think maybe moving to a partnership is something that makes a little bit more sense at the moment, in my opinion.
Yeah, we'll have to see how that plays out. Again, it's a long off season. Some of the news. Penske's entire driver lineup is expected to return. Andretti's entire driver's lineup is expected to return. Rahal is going to stay static. Sebastian Bourdais will be returning at Dale Coyne Racing. We know that Ed Carpenter and Spencer Piggott will be back. Remains to be seen if we'll still see Jordan King in the road course car, though it is my understanding that Ed Carpenter would really much like to keep him. And then Ganassi, obviously Dixon has signed his contract for a few more years with Chip after exploring options with McLaren and Penske and every other rumor you want to believe. But so the number 10 car over there at Ganassi. Now, Ganassi hasn't had a solid 1-2 punch since Dario left the team. We had TK in there, and TK just for whatever reason, I think one victory over the 4 years he was there, maybe two. And then Ed Jones had a kind of an up and down season this year. Never did crack victory lane there, but the guy there that we keep hearing about, and this is not a lock, is Felix Rosenqvist, who's running Formula E right now. So are the Rosenqvist rumors getting stronger, or are they getting weaker? And if Felix doesn't make the jump over to IndyCar, who else do you see in that seat maybe?
It's kind of funny, like we talked about stretching your resources too thin, and we moved to a Ganassi subject, who was a 4-car team at one point and couldn't win with anybody but Dixon on a regular basis. I feel like the situation with the 10 car is really in flux. If Felix Rosenqvist has tested with Ganassi a couple of times and tested really well, like we're talking, went to Mid-Ohio, one of probably arguably Dixon's best track, and was within a tenth or two of Dixon's time instantly. So when we're talking about a talent, we're talking about an elite talent who maybe Richard could agree to this to some level, should be in a decent seat in F1. I don't know about a Mercedes or Ferrari level seat, but certainly an upper mid-tier, because he's just got incredible talent. And unfortunately, that's the way it goes, right? There's so much talent, not enough seats. But from what I understand, the situation's really in flux. It's about the same as we heard a month and a half, 2 months ago. I think the curious thing here is what happens with Ed Jones, right? Because he certainly didn't hurt himself this year. He ran pretty solidly, collected a few good runs, and you're asking a guy to pick up a move from a Dale Coyne Racing, and that was under the old aero kit, and he has to learn a new aero kit with a new team in his first year. I kind of wish that this thing plays out to where we see Felix and we see Ed Jones next year. I don't know if that's going to necessarily be the case, but certainly I think that Ed would not hinder himself with another year, with whether it's with Ganassi or somebody else. But at some point, you've got to have some consistency and some stability. And I feel like for Ganassi's situation, stability certainly wouldn't hurt them whenever we're talking about a second team. That said, Felix Rosenqvist would be really fun to have in the series as well.
Yes, he would. Well, we don't want to take up the whole show with IndyCar, although we could. But we'll have to say goodbye to IndyCar for now, and goodbye to IndyCar till 2019. And that's through the off season we'll revisit with rumors and whatnot. But another season in the books. I guess we can't make any picks for next week, huh? So, but let's talk about the NASCAR race then. So, and Joey just really quick says the possibility that the Bourdais-Jones lineup could be rekindled at Dale Coyne, and yes, it certainly could. Yeah, because that Coyne seat is up for grabs. Although I think that Pietro Fittipaldi has a pretty good inside line on it, at least on a part-time basis. So, but and again, rumors of a third Coyne car are out there floating around. So, but anyway, we need to turn our attention to the NASCAR Cup Series, who started their playoff this week. Gray, 3 in a row for Brad Keselowski. Talk about peaking at the right time, huh? Well, what were your thoughts on this Vegas race?
Yeah, and he has come around these last 3 races, but I tell you, he's been kind of opportunistic in all 3. He has not been the dominant car in any of the 3, but has just parlayed good pit work and really good luck into being in the right spot at the right time and able to capitalize on his opportunity and win these races. He did at Darlington. He did the following week at Indy, restarts and things, and he just kind of parlayed luck. He ended up with the freshest tires there after the last restart, and then of course at this weekend at Las Vegas, he had to kind of work a little bit harder for it because he had to withstand a couple of restarts there, but was able to keep his car out front and get the win. And I said last week after we talked about his second win in a row that he's positioned himself to be one of those final four at the end of the season when they go to Miami, and might be able to pull this thing off. And like we talked about, and just like any stick and ball sports, when you come to a postseason tournament, it's the team that gets hot and is able to produce that can ultimately win the championship. And I think he's positioned himself really well right now. He's already passed through to the next round, so he can kind of work on his stuff and get ready for the next round.
Yeah, now some of the other guys had some trouble there. Now, Seth, Kevin Harvick, last place finish, right, or next to last?
Next to last.
As well as Erik Jones down there near the bottom of the order as well. Kyle Busch ran into trouble. Kurt Busch ran into trouble.
In total, 9 of the 16 playoff drivers had some sort of issue.
Yeah, and Kyle Busch was able to rebound from his trouble and ended up getting a good solid top 10.
Sorry, guys.
I guess everybody's phone's going off in North Carolina, some kind of alert. But
yeah, anybody seen a 1990 blue Ford F-250 in Asheville, North Carolina?
But Kyle Busch was able to rebound from his bad luck and get a good solid top 10. And speaking of Harvick had accumulated enough of the bonus points where that really was his mulligan. But he's used that up. The bonus points he had for the playoff points, rather, that's going to keep him in good stead even with that 39th place finish. But there went his cushion. So
it did take part of his cushion. However, he's still 36 or so points up over the cutoff. So he still has about half a race to a full race, give or take.
Yeah, I mean, Harvick's worst-case scenario would involve all the guys in the middle to the bottom of the chase order winning races and grabbing spots, and that's so it'd make it harder for him to glide through on points. But because there's only you eliminate 4 guys every 3 races, I think Harvick and Kyle Busch are relatively safe to go all the way through the final round on points, unless, like I say, all the middle and the bottom guys, if you start getting Chase Elliott win a race and Erik Jones win another one, and so.
I guess my point was making Harvick would like to have kept those points in the bank rather than have to use them, for this. But I mean, that's
no
a
doubt.
good thing.
Yeah.
He's got them, but he'll be able to help him advance. But yeah, didn't want to use. I'm sure he didn't want to use them, But yeah, Kyle Busch is still sitting pretty because it looked at one time where he was going to have a very poor finish when he was able to rebound and finish, I think, 7th, Seth? I think he got 7th place.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, he was able to kind of get away without a lot of damage to his title hopes
now
going forward.
Now, something else I do want to mention, of the drivers that ran into trouble, Chase Elliott was one of them when Jamie McMurray cut a tire and whipped around in front of him. In the interview outside the infield care center, Chase said that he heard his shoulder pop, and trying to take the belts off, he popped it back into place. So that almost sounded like he dislocated his shoulder and popped it back into place. Again, I'm not a medical expert, but it's not common that you see injuries, regardless whether it's a dislocated shoulder or a more serious injury in NASCAR today. But that just caught me a little by surprise. And Brad Keselowski winning, that was Team Penske's 500th victory across all forms of motorsports.
Yeah, that's quite impressive. That really is. But going back,
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. All those Team Penske guys were hoping to be the one.
Yep.
Will Power's hoping to be the one to give it to him. So was Joey Logano. So was either the guys driving the Acuras, Elio and whatnot. But it was Brad, and they busted those 500 hats out. Good looking hat. I hope those are for sale somewhere. I might get me one.
But going back to Chase's injury, it was a little bit surprising in that accident. You don't know whether he got caught up in the belts or what. We'll probably get a little more information about that. I'm sure someone will ask him about it as we get closer to Richmond or at the news conferences prior to Richmond. But it's not an uncommon injury in football. You see guys. I've seen guys pop the shoulder out and take a tennis ball and stick it under their arm and pop the shoulder right back in place and go back in the game. So, but it is unusual in motorsports to see that. So we'll have to kind of watch and listen for some stories on that as we go into Richmond weekend.
And one more story that I do want to talk about real quick. Speaking of drivers that haven't taken advantage of opportunities, Ross Chastain, he's ran his second race for Ganassi in the Xfinity Series. He runs full-time for JD Motorsports. Dominated the race, won both stages, won the race. He made the playoffs. He now has 9 playoff points, which is more than about half of the playoff grid in the Xfinity Series. He's running the Richmond race for Ganassi in the Xfinity Series. He's not getting paid by Ganassi. He's running for free, and he has yet to actually meet Chip Ganassi.
That's interesting. I've met Chip Ganassi. He's not missing out on much.
But
I'm sorry to say that, but it's true. So, but anyway, speaking of so Seth, isn't Chastain the one that had the contract dispute with Ganassi, or am I mixing him
that
up?
was Brendan Poole.
Okay, all right. So that makes a little more sense. So, but speaking of drivers and switching in, there's some driver movement, Gray, that's hitting you close to home there with the announcement that you guys will not be employing the services of a certain Mr. Ryan Newman next year. So, what's going on there? What do you know? What can you tell?
Well, it came out Saturday morning that Ryan released a statement via Twitter that he would not return to the number 31 Caterpillar Chevrolet for the 2019 season. It had already been, from what we can gather, this was kind of the timing of this was a little curious, that it kind of caught everybody kind of off guard. But it tells me that Ryan had already had something lined up for 2019 and was able to make that announcement. From what I understand in the statement from Richard Childress is that they released him from his contract last month. It wasn't made public, but I'm sure that there had been ongoing negotiations to re-sign him for next year, and probably it just came to a point where it wasn't going to happen. He did not agree to terms with RCR and decided to go another route, and decided at that time to make the announcement. So he's gone. Speculation has him going to the 6th car at Roush Fenway for next year. Of course, we probably won't have an announcement on that for a while there. But, we're coming up on Charlotte the week after Richmond, and typically Charlotte week when everybody's back home in the Charlotte area, Charlotte has always been a time when people have made major announcements, so we can see if anything comes up next week, and I'm sure Seth will be there covering that for us week after next week. So, but yeah, it's a little bit surprising, but just adds one more domino to fall in this silly season. So now we've got the 31 car, the 41 car, the 1, the 19, the 95 cars open, and of course, there's speculation about who's going where, what, but there's been nothing permanently set on anything or anything concrete. So we'll have to see what happens. But I believe that's all the cars right now, Seth.
You also have the 6.
Yeah, the 6, right? The 6, the 95, the 1, the 41, the 31, the 19, and the 95, right?
And those are all the ones that are officially announced. There's still talk that the 47 might be in play.
Yeah, that's true.
And possibly 1 or 2 others.
Yeah. So
there's a couple of puzzle pieces we can put together, but this is the wildest silly season we've had in Cup in a couple of years. Don't you agree?
Yeah, it's most movement.
I'm going to say there's been a lot of these. Last couple of years we had several retirements of some of the top guys, but they had successors ready to go. So I mean, other than the fact that Truex is probably a lock for that Gibbs seat, all these others are up in the air.
Yeah. Well, they say that Truex and Cole Pern will go and occupy the 19, and that Suarez will end up in the 95 with full Toyota support as an alliance team of Joe Gibbs. But there again, other rumors have Kurt Busch going to the 1. One rumor, and like I said, it's total speculation rumor, has Daniel Hemrick maybe stepping up and going into the 31. But like I said, that's just rumor mill stuff. Really don't know what Jamie McMurray's going to do. Like I said, I alluded to Ryan Newman going to the 6. The 41, hadn't really been much going on there as far as the rumors there. So we'll just kind of have to wait and see. And of course, like Seth said, there was rumors at one time that this would be that Allmendinger would be leaving the 47s, but that rumor hadn't seen that again in a while. So I don't know where that's headed. But it's been and Trevor Bayne, Trevor Bayne leaving the 6, and he will not be back next year, so we don't know where he'll end up.
And just to throw another wrench into all this, Ross Chastain winning Vegas. Chip Ganassi said on SiriusXM NASCAR today, he actually said that both he and at least 2 other owners are talking to Chastain about possible rides for him, whether it's the Xfinity Series or Cup Series. Mm-hmm. That's up to debate. But he pretty much changed the course of his career with that win, and he could even be in play for some of those rides.
Yeah, and too, I really thought about this morning, and I don't know what Allgaier's plans are for next year, or whether he plans on returning to junior motorsports for another year in that. But Allgaier would be a very enticing prospect for any of those rides. He's got Cup equity. He's been there before, and he's run very well in the Xfinity Series this year. Oh. And in fact, he's probably hit along with Christopher Bell, one of the favorites to win the championship.
Well, my understanding for Allgaier is that he doesn't have a desire to return to the Cup Series.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I've read that too. Yeah. So, but fellas, let's move on to just preview Richmond real quick, because I want to have some time to talk about Singapore and Formula One. So we're heading to Richmond. One of the more exciting things is Dale Jr. is going to run the Xfinity race. It's not because he missed the car. It was evidently a prearranged thing with his sponsor Hellman's that was set up a couple of years ago that he'd be driving the car. But we'll get to see Junior back in a car in the Xfinity race, and then. And Joey says it'll be the most watched Xfinity race of the year. And Joey, you're absolutely right. But let's talk about the Cup race, and let's try to see who's the next guy that's gonna win a race and punch a ticket.
Well,
Seth?
I'm here.
You can make your comment first, and then you have to make a pick.
What I was going to say is some of the drivers that ran well earlier in the year at Richmond, Denny Hamlin, you have Chase Elliott, you have a number of different people who could break through. Whether or not they do because of the Big Three or Big Four, however you want to word it with Keselowski, I think you have to go with one of them. So my pick is going to be Kyle Busch.
Okay, good pick. Richard?
Mine would have been the same, but I'm going to go for Kevin Harvick.
All right, and Joey?
Well, we're stealing each other's picks before we can make them. Richard took my pick.
Well, you could go ahead and take
You're welcome.
Ray's. You go ahead and take Ray's then.
Honestly, with the way everything's kind of looking, I feel like Kurt Busch and Richmond just kind of got a thing going on. So I'll say that.
Sounds good, Joey Gray.
Well, race 2 of the playoffs, and a lot of guys are behind the 8 ball, and they're really going to have to go. I think we're looking at possibly one of the more competitive races of the season, Saturday night at Richmond, with a lot of guys trying to make up ground and position, recover from a bad race at Las Vegas. You normally would think you'd have to go with some of the top the big 3, but I'm thinking that we're going to see a different winner there. I tell you, I think Keselowski, he's always run good there and Logano have always run. The Penske cars have run good at Richmond. They're on a roll there. They got a lot of confidence, and I think maybe we could see possibly someone from Team Penske get the win there. But I'm gonna say, I tell you what, it hadn't been done in a long time. I'm gonna say we get a new Mr. September, and it's going to be Keselowski.
All right, and I was thinking along those lines of Team Penske, that all those wins that Brad took, Joey actually wasn't far behind, and Joey's got, I believe, 3 Richmond wins on his resume already. So I'm gonna take Joey Logano. And Seth, you said you have 2 more little points about Richmond before we move on to Richard's Formula One report.
Yes, we have 2 drivers making their NASCAR oval debuts, at least in the U.S. You have Catherine Legg in the Xfinity Series, and in the Cup Series you have Alon Day, who won the Euro Series championship last year.
How many entries for Richmond in the Cup
40.
race? 40. Okay, so he's a guaranteed spot.
And in the Xfinity Series, there's 41, but Catherine Legg is running a car that is in on points.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
That'll be interesting to watch.
Interesting to see Catherine Legg. It's her cup. I mean, she's got some oval experience. She's run the Indy 500. So, but I thought she held her own pretty well. Was it Road America?
Road America, or was it Mid-Ohio?
Mid-Ohio. Yeah, she was at both those races. So, all right. So Richmond coming up, Saturday night race under the lights. Speaking of racing, under the lights, Formula One was in Singapore this past weekend. It was on the middle of the night for us in the States. But Richard, for you, who lives on European time, it wasn't that late. So
That was a smooth link there. I like that.
It wasn't it? That was good, huh?
Oh, brilliant! Yeah, you've been saving it. You've been waiting a year for that one.
A year, yes.
Well, the race was 8:00 Eastern time on Sunday, so it wasn't too bad.
No, it wasn't too bad.
And for us insomniacs in the world, it was perfect. But no, it was. I mean, the story of the weekend was Saturday, bar none. As much as Lewis Hamilton defied opinions within Formula One fan base, he's a bit like a Keselowski of the Formula One world, isn't he? You love him or hate him. The lap that he pulled out in the on his first run in Q3 on Saturday was just mind blowing. I'm not going to say it. Some people have had, but it was almost Senna-esque, going back to Monaco in the late 80s, in the way that he destroyed the field. Nobody could get close to that lap. I mean, they might as well all just packed up and gone home at that point and saved a set of tyres. It was phenomenal, and since then, everybody was behind the 8-ball there, and there was nothing they could do on a circuit like that where Hamilton is smart enough to be able to manage a race and manage his tyres. There was nothing that the Ferraris could do. The Ferraris tried to go off strategy and actually made it worse for themselves, maybe trying to back Mercedes into a corner and for them to make a mistake, but it certainly didn't work. And it just became a bit of a procession during the race. I think the biggest thing that came out of the actual race after Hamilton's win was Sergio Perez in the Force India or Point Racing Force India, or whatever they're called now, just having brain fade twice in 2 hours. On lap 1, he decided that he should drive his teammate into the wall, which was, I'd give him the benefit of the doubt on that one. It was a racing incident to my mind. But then the second incident was by far the worse. He'd got off strategy compared to some of the cars behind him, and was being held up by Sergei Sorokin for numerous laps. He was complaining on the radio to Charlie Whiting that should be let through, but I mean, at the end of the day, it's for position here. It's not, it's not a blue flag. It wasn't a lap guy. He has to pass him on his own right, and he just couldn't get by. And Singapore's a difficult place, especially when both the Force India and the Williams were running with the same engines, so they had the same power output. And at one point, Perez sort of got past Sorokin, and then going into the next complex of corners, Sorokin actually pushed his way back through again, and I think that caught Perez out a little bit. And then in the little short shoot where, going back all those years, Nelson Piquet Jr. deliberately crashed, Perez sort of just sideswiped Sorokin. And, I mean, they were lucky that, in a way, they were both able to carry on. But, there was no penalty to Perez for... major penalty. I think he got a drive-through penalty for that, but in reality it was a slap on the wrist. And then you have the race director turning around and saying, I can't imagine that Sergio would have done that deliberately. Well, you may not have imagined it, but it looked like he did.
Yeah,
so,
the rest of the other million people that watch Formula One.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think Charlie Whiting was a little bit naive to that one, unfortunately. That was Sergio's greatest hour.
How much of that situation, just to pick your brain here on this, do you think plays into account the silly season with what's going to happen with that second seat? I mean, because we all know that Lance Stroll's going to get one of those seats, right? And so does Perez, the man that saved the team from did the whole administration situation, is he still... How do I say this? Is he looking over his shoulders wondering, oh, my goodness, Ocon and Mercedes, and I've got to challenge that, so, the heat's on? Because it for whatever reason, at least one or two races out of the year, Perez is due for a brain fart. I mean, there's no other way to say it. And I feel Marcus Ericsson right now races more within himself than Sergio Perez, and I'm wondering if this has to do with something with the pressure for that second seat, because... we've seen, Perez has the better overall finish between them in Azerbaijan, but when it comes to support with Mercedes, who also supplies those engines, it makes you wonder if maybe the situation shouldn't shift to where this team is really looking at Ocon and Perez was out there trying to make a statement and maybe push too hard.
Well, I think there's two things here, really. I think, firstly, with the whole, the way everything played out, around the Hungarian race and over the winter, the summer break, it wouldn't surprise me if part of the deal, Perez said, "Hey, look, I'm going to be the catalyst here, which sorts this all out and brings the new ownership on board. If you sign me up for next year, potentially." I think those two go hand in hand. But then the also thing, you got to look at Perez's career long term. There was talk about him potentially going back to McLaren to replace Alonso, and you're sort of starting to wonder about Perez. Is he another Grosjean, Hülkenberg? Guys like that who no doubt are fantastic drivers. I mean, world class drivers, but they're just not at the pinnacle of the sport like some of these guys are, and maybe their time in a top drive. I mean, Perez obviously had his opportunity in McLaren those years ago, but maybe his opportunity in a top car has just sort of passed him by a little bit, and more due to circumstance than ability. And that's bound to boil over in frustration at some point. And I think that I think this is a prime example. But when you compare, to my mind, back in when Grosjean had his penalty, was it 2010, 11, in Spa, one race ban, what Perez did was far more deliberate and far more, not necessarily dangerous, but far more avoidable than some of the other times you've seen one race bans. So I think the guy's very lucky there.
Yeah, and he's got super license points that
boo-hoo.
there too. So
has anybody ever been banned on the super license yet? Point system?
Couple are close. You'd like to think Verstappen's super close.
No, he's been pretty good lately because he's on a 12-month rolling thing. So
Yeah, those earlier infractions drop off. So Richard, where are we off to next?
I believe we're off to Sochi. Yeah, Sochi in Russia.
In Russia, yeah.
At the end of the month.
So we've got another week off.
Yeah, so it's the last weekend of September there. So I think it's the same weekend as the Roval.
Okay, yeah, that'll be interesting.
Yeah, same weekend as the Roval.
All right, guys, we are just about out of time, but I would be remiss if I did not mention this one tidbit from this past weekend, that we got to see a video message from Robert Wickens from his from Indiana University there. I mean, he's in good spirits. It's obviously he's in bad shape. He's bandaged up pretty good. Got a lot of got a lot of devices on his arms, on his chest there. But he wanted to thank all the fans for his support. So if you haven't had a chance to hop on Twitter and have a look at that, or hop on Facebook and have a look at that. Great message from Robert Wickens, wishing the series well at the end of the year and thanking the fans for their support. And we are all hoping and praying for a speedy recovery, and look forward to seeing him back in a car sometime in the future. But with that being said, we are out of time tonight, so I want to thank the Hoobazoo Radio Network. Thank you folks that listen in. I want to thank iHeartRadio. I want to thank you, Seth, Joey, Gray, and Richard. Appreciate talking to you guys every week. And that being said, we'll talk to you next week. Good night.
WHOOBAZOO, that's Hoobazoo.com.
Enter website, enter website, enter website, enter website.